Thank you, Julie, so much, and all of you people. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, yeah. So Julie's nice reminding us to have a bodhicitta motivation. Why don't we just sing a little prayer? I'll sing a little prayer that kind of expresses that, you know. I mean, as we know, our lamas would say at the beginning, we always set our motivation for what we're going to do. And I think we might say, we state our purpose. What's our goal? What's our purpose? Why are we here together for this couple of hours? Well, it's to look at this whole business of death and, you know, and how to approach it, both during our lives and at the end of life. So what's our purpose? Well, I suppose you could say the bodhicitta motivation is our long-term purpose. So we think we're going to do this activity of listening, thinking, analyzing, contemplating these thoughts that we'll be discussing, so that we can eventually develop our marvelous potential of Buddhahood, so we can be of benefit to others. But I suppose we can also say the short term is so that we can take some advice from this to know how to live our own lives better, so we're ready for death, so that we can be of benefit to others, to help them do the same. So let's just sing our little prayer. The first two lines, for those of us who kind of identify with being a Buddhist, it reiterates our reliance on the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But the second two lines express this motivation, this altruistic motivation. And I'm sure in all of the traditions, we probably say similar prayers. So this is probably familiar to everybody. So just have those thoughts in your heart, you know. And I'll sing the prayer. Sangye chadang soke chognam la jangshu baru dagni kyabsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shog sangye chadang soke chognam la jangshu baru dagni kyabsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shog sangye chadang soke chognam la Jang tu baru dagni kyab suchi dagi tunyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sange dropa sho. Well, so this How to Face Death Without Fear is the title of this book of Lama Zopa Rinpoche that I happened to edit. It was published by Wisdom. And really it's basically a handbook, you know. It's as Rinpoche said, when actually the teachings from this are actually from a teaching he gave many years ago at our center in France. And Rinpoche was teaching something different. And then at some point, one of his old students came and said, her daddy died, and her old daddy, and I didn't know what to do. So I think Rinpoche was quite surprised, because we all know, if we're Buddhists, and certainly if we're Vajrayana Buddhists or Tibetan Buddhists, we absolutely learn about impermanence from day one, you know. So we're very familiar, but I suppose because of the depth of our fear and our denial of death, we don't want to think about it. And so Rinpoche shifted course, and then he basically, most of the teachings in this book is what he gave then. So you could say that there are two ways, and we know, again, if we're Tibetan Buddhists, there are two main ways to approach the whole idea of death. One is to know how to live your life in relation to it. You don't wait till death to deal with it. You know, it's like you don't wait for your driving test to come. You don't say, oh, I'll be okay on the day. No, you won't be okay on the day. You need to know how to learn to drive. You better start learning to drive now. Otherwise, you'll have a panic attack on the day. Well, it's just the same with anything. You got to deal with it. And so, because we know Lord Buddha's teachings on impermanence are pretty incredible, one of his very first teachings, entry-level grade 1 junior school, is learn about impermanence, learn to recognize, you know. So in those course notes I've sent you, they're very brief. There's just a few teachings in the first part, and the second part of the teachings are like general teachings about karma, the mind, emptiness, bodhicitta as background, you know. But the very first thing is to learn to know how to live life in relation to him, in relation to the fact of death.
And so why is this? Because we know one of the misconceptions in our mind, deep in the bones of our being, and this is one of Buddha's teachings, is that we all intensely grasp at everything as being permanent. You know, we can't stand the thought of change. And so it's very primordial inside us. And so not that we think, you know, the relationship won't change and the house won't change and our beautiful grandmother's cup won't change, but we all know things change, things break, things change. And of course, the most primordial is this person we cling to most will definitely stop being this person at some point. And actually, as Lama Zopa points out, you know, if he says, if you want to help anybody in this life, he said, and this is often surprising to us, and certainly according to the materialist view, the time they need you most is at the time of death. And the simple reason is because it's at the time of death, and we're going to be discussing this here. And as we know, it's described in great detail in the Vajrayana teachings, which is such a blessing. At the time of death, this process is really deeply described in the literature, coming from the experience of the yogis. It's at the time of death, very precisely, that the karmic seed that will be the one that will determine our next life is triggered at that time. So that's when we're needed most. And whether it's for your pussycat or your dog or your grandmother, that's when they need you most. Why? As Rinpoche points out, because there's so much fear about death. And why there's fear at death is because we grasp at permanence. We can't stand the thought of not being me. And so, of course, if we're Christian, this is marvelous. At least you have faith in a creator, and you know that when you die, you'll go to heaven with God. And then you at least got something to look forward to. And you can actually, that can help you tremendously live your life and die well. And if you're a Buddhist, you've got the concept, you know, that your consciousness will continue. So you can use this in order to know that you plan for the future life. And this is the concept of karma. And we're going to go into this. But, you know, quite frankly, if you're a philosophical materialist, what have you got to look forward to except a black hole? So no wonder we don't want to think about death. No one can't bear the thought of nothing afterwards. So no wonder we have fear. So we happily live in denial of it, you know, and it's just not helpful, because if at the time of death is when the karmic seed that we have planted in our mind from our own lives is the one that will determine our future life, we better be in control of the process, you know. And so this is why fear, we know fear comes if you don't have wisdom, you don't have knowledge about anything, fear is going to be there. So to have the knowledge, both about how to live our lives in the context of impermanence, making it something completely automatic, and second, have a very clear understanding of what happens at the time of death. This is tremendous wisdom to have. And then we can learn to die, literally die with a happy mind, you know. So what we're going to do today then in this 2 hours is just look at impermanence in general, but in particular, we're going to go through the process itself taught in the Vajrayana traditions, these 8 stages. As we know, it's described in 8 stages of this gradual deconstruction of this person. And we can learn to meditate on that, you know. And indeed, if we have a Vajrayana practice, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, death is what the yogis have been waiting for. And we'll certainly talk about this. Why? Is because these, you know, the Vajrayana sadhanas, the various deity practices are set up in such a way that when you do the meditation on emptiness, you incorporate the actual process of death. It's a very integrated, very, very experiential kind of process. And so the yogis can't wait for the time of death, because it's then that their mind goes to this very subtle level, and they're able, because of they've been practicing all their lives, they're able to use that very subtle level of mind at that time in order to get enlightened. The greatest yogis can do this, you know. So there's much to learn about this. It's very marvelous, right? So then, okay, so the first one is, let's just look briefly, and this is the first chapter in the course notes, very briefly at, as we know from Lama Atisha in the 11th century, when he put in his little text, which is used as the basis for all the Tibetan traditions for their presentation of the path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim, as we call it in the Gelugpas, you know, maybe Lamdre, they call it in the Sakyapas, but it's all effectively the same. The very first teaching that Atisha gets us to look at is this concept of impermanence, but specifically in the framework of death. And why? Because his agenda is to give us a wake-up call. If we realize not just impermanence in general, but very specifically the impermanence of this person, then this enables us to recognize my impermanence and therefore not want to waste my life. Because and that means we have to understand the mind, which of course is that, and this is the crucial point if we're trying to be Buddhist, what is it that reincarnates? What is it that dies? It's the consciousness, the mind. So the very first thing we should understand is, just briefly, to give us the overview of what our mind is. So as we know from the Buddhist teachings, this fundamental difference in the Buddhist teachings, our consciousness, or our mind, isn't our brain. It does not come from our mummy or daddy. It does not come from anybody outside, including a creator, and it doesn't come from nothing. It's this beginningless and endless continuity of mental moments that is not physical, that comes into this life programmed with what we've put into that mind. And this is so the two main things we really have to comprehend to understand the process of death in Buddhism and to make it part of our life is the nature of mind, which is it's not physical. It is not the handiwork of somebody else. It's not a function of the brain. It doesn't come from a creator and doesn't come from nothing. So what it is this continuity of mental moments. And then the other thing we have to learn, and this is crucial in order to live our lives properly, in order to be ready for death, in order to ensure we get another decent human body or get born in a pure land, because they're our main options, is to realize the law of karma, which is this natural law that runs the universe, basically, such that everything we think and do and say is the process itself that produces the person we become. I mean, this is the fundamental concept in Buddhism. If we could, and sometimes as Buddhists, we don't much care about karma, but if we miss karma, we miss the absolute basis of all of Buddha's teachings. This idea that consciousness is not physical, it comes from the past, and everything we think and do and say programs that consciousness. Buddha would have liked that concept, I think. Sows seeds in that consciousness. Buddha used that analogy. Everything we think and do and say without exception sows seeds in the mind, and those seeds at some point will ripen in the future in 4 different ways. 1, a type of rebirth. So from that perspective, if we're trying to, if we're on the Buddhist path, very simply, we do not want to be born in the lower realms. We do not want to be born in the God realms. That's pretty useless waste of time. We don't want to be born as an animal. That's a waste of time as well. We want to be born as very least another human being. And the law of karma gives us very clearly, because it's a natural law, the simple methodology for how to make sure you get a good human body. And that's where we live our lives in discipline. This is again the first level of Buddha's teachings. We live a disciplined life of controlling our body, controlling our speech, and controlling our mind. We live in vows. We program our mind with virtue. We stop programming our mind with non-virtue. This is a fundamental way to live our lives. And then we start to work on our minds, and we learn to meditate. We learn to control the mind. We learn to then deconstruct our mind and lessen attachment, lessen anger, lessen the neuroses, because they're the basis of what we do. So we're gradually this process, living our lives in ethics, in goodness, lessening neuroses, growing goodness, growing virtue, growing wisdom, realizing we're impermanent and death could come at any time. So the very first point that Atisha points out to us is death is definite. We analyze that, and we look at that every day. The dog dies, your grandmother dies, the ants die, every day people die. The second point is that the time of death is definitely not definite, and that's really should really wake us up. And the third point, of course, is the third point, at the time of death, what's important? And this is the crucial point. So from the Buddhist perspective, given that our mind is a continuity of mental moments that comes into this life, programmed with my own past tendencies, given that my consciousness will then leave the body and take another rebirth, given that I do want happiness and don't want suffering, and given that everything I think and do and say programs my mind, then I'd better be in charge of it. And so the only thing that's of any benefit to me at that time of death is the virtuous karmic imprints in my mind. Then what's the benefit of having non-virtue in my mind? I do not want that. So because I want to be assured that when I die, and if I live my life in context of impermanence, I'll be content. I won't be fearful. I will be able to control my mind. And then I will be able to have the virtuous karmic imprints from my own past virtue, be able to be triggered at the time of death, so that when I stop breathing, my mind then goes into the intermediate state. And then when the time is ready, I'll hop into my new mother's womb and off I'll go, carry on my spiritual path. That's the whole plan. And it's surprising to us, I think, to think that we can be in charge of this process. I think we all, of course, if I'm a Christian, I'm going to have faith in God, and I know God will make sure that I am rewarded, and that's a wonderful view, but that's not the Buddha's view. If you're a materialist, I'm not sure, you know, if you live a good life, at least if you live a good life, and you'd want to, because when you do die, you want to leave something good behind you, nothing wrong with that. But the Buddhist approach is, you know, we can be in control of this process. And so we are the one. Don't just wait for your Lama to say, oh, I'm sure my Lama will take care of me at the time of death. No, we have to be prepared by living our lives, knowing that we're in charge. And already that really lessens our fear. And we know that it's this, and karma, we have to keep remembering that, you know, it's a natural law. Buddha didn't make it up. No one runs it. It's not punishment. It's not reward, which are the usual views we have. It's this natural process such that everything we think and do and say programs our mind, sows seeds in our mind. So given that that's the way to live our lives, we will then learn to want to live in vows, to want to live a virtuous life, to want to sow positive seeds. And then when death does come, I won't be shocked. I won't be surprised. And, you know, you can then, and even if you're a meditator, even better. So you can ensure that your mind, at the very least, gets another decent human body so you can carry on your spiritual path, you know. So the other option, of course, is a Pure Land rebirth. And that's something I know, I remember thinking about. I never liked to think about Pure Lands. I thought Pure Lands were boring. I thought, no, I'd rather be a human being, please. But now I remember from the time in this book, there's a chapter in there about we should want to pray to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. So if we've got time, we'll discuss that point, you know, because now I'm a fan of Amitabha's Pure Land. And why you want to go to a Pure Land, and we mightn't have time in our 2 hours, you know, is that you can get enlightened quickly in a Pure Land. This is very specific to the Buddhist teachings. So it's a really nice option. But effectively, we want to, at the very least, get another decent human mother. And the law, it's about understanding the law of karma and knowing what the causes are of that. I mean, anything that you're going to have in the future, you need to know the causes. If you want to have a tree, you need to know the causes. If you want rose bushes, you need to know the causes, and you sow those seeds, and then you nourish those seeds, and you'll get your rose bush. Well, that's the view of karma. You know, if you want a decent human body, what are the causes? Well, the first cause is the virtuous, very specifically, the virtuous karma first of broadly non-harming, specifically non-killing. So the very specific cause, the main cause of your mind leaving this body and finding its way to another human mother, the main cause is non-killing. So if we use the example of our past life, you know, how come our mind found its way to our present mother's human womb? It's pretty much like this, you know, not more than a few weeks before that indeed happened, that our mind found its way to our present mother's fallopian tube, where it joined the egg and sperm of our mummy and daddy. We were in another body, and it could have been an ant's body, could have been a kangaroo's body. It doesn't have to follow that it was a human body. So at that time of our death, one of our millions of karmic seeds, because everything we think and do and say drops seeds in our little bank vaults, you know, nothing goes astray. One of our virtuous, particularly our virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing, was triggered. And if we take this 8 stages of death process, it would have occurred in about the second or third of those stages, when you're gradually losing the plot in terms of your senses going, your earth element ceasing, your water element ceasing, your eye consciousness going, your ear consciousness going. This happens in the first 4 steps of the death process, which we will talk about. So about the second or third stage, in our case, a particular karmic seed of past non-killing. And as Lama Zopa says, if we look into our lives, here we are with a spiritual path and good conditions pretty much, then probably the karmic seed of non-killing that we did create, that was the one that was triggered at the time of our past death, was probably created in the context of living in a spiritual path, and even more specifically, practice in the context of keeping vows of not killing. So one of those very rich non-killing karmic seed was triggered, and that already programmed us even before we stopped breathing. This is what's so fascinating. Even before we stopped breathing in the past body, not more than a few weeks, maybe 7 weeks before this conception in our mother's womb, that karmic seed was triggered, which already programmed us to go to this present mother's human womb. Now, the other 3 types of karmic seeds were also triggered at that time, because the fundamental point about karma is that our actions, karma, ripen in 4 ways. The first one is a type of rebirth. So in our case, here we are, we've got a human one, the fruit of our past non-killing. It's like winning the lottery. It's so amazing to have a human body. It's incredible. But the second way our karma ripens is in that body, in our case, we've got a mind. and then whatever our mental tendencies are. So we can see Hitler has got a human body and Mother Teresa had a human body. Look at the difference. What's the difference? Their mind, you know, their tendencies. And you can see pretty evidently from Hitler's behavior what his crazy tendencies were. Pretty negative, pretty deluded. We can see with Mother Teresa, her tendencies based on her actions were virtuous. So the second way that karma ripens is the type of mind you've got, your particular tendencies. And that means whether you're good at football or killing or love or compassion. Those second set of karmic seeds, in our case, in that previous life, before we even passed away, the first karmic seed gave us this human body, caused already us to go, programmed to go to that our mother's human womb. Second, the tendencies in this mind of ours we now are expressing in this life. So we can see one of them, what a miracle, is the wish to be a better person, the wish to be a spiritual person, the wish to be virtuous and ethical. Look at us, aren't we fortunate? But also our negative tendencies. The third way that our karma ripens eventually is called experiences similar to the cause. So these are all the seeds that have ripened from the time of our conception in terms of how people see us and treat us. So we've got reasonable conditions. People like us. We have good friends. We get credit at the bank. People don't lie to us. People believe our words. People don't steal from us, murder us, rape us. How fortunate. Some of those things might happen. So all of those karmic seeds of called experiences similar to the cause were already triggered at the time of this past death. And even the fourth lot, they're called environmental karma. So we have one, the karmic seed that is causing us to get this human body. Two, all the karmic seeds that produce our own personality. Three, the karmic seeds that then produce the type of life we have in relation to others and how we're seen and treated. And four, even the physical world, the way it impacts upon us. So this is the entire life. And all of these karmic seeds created by whom? Oneself. So they are all the ones that were triggered at that time. We were programmed. Not even before you stopped breathing in the past life. They were already programmed. And then, and this is the crucial point about why it's so important to help people at the time of death. Because in our case, how fortunate that a virtuous seed of non-killing was triggered. And that implies that our death must have been fairly peaceful. Because basically the point is what Lama Zopa point is, why a person needs you most at the time of death is because you need, by your presence, and this is the key one for all of us, and this book is framed in terms of how to help your loved ones die well, you know, because when most of us don't like death, and even animals have fear at death, it's just so instinctive. Then to be a person who can be there with your little dog, with your grandmother, with your sister, with your child, and give them support, and in other words, make them feel relaxed, make them feel calm. And then when the mind is calm, that enables a virtuous karmic seed to be triggered, which enables that person then when they die to get another decent human body. This is the greatest gift. This is the greatest gift, because we know when things are not good, like if you're dying or you're sick, you desperately need help. You want someone to support you. So this is the most precious gift we can give. And so much of the advice in this book actually is how to be, you know, with someone who's dying. And the advice in the book, it's kind of given chronologically. There's several parts in the book, and one of them is what to do in the weeks and months before death in order to help your loved one be peaceful, and all these different practices that Rinpoche recommends. I mean, 2/3 of the book actually is all the different sutras and prayers and mantras and practices that you can do at different stages to help your loved one. Then the next level is what to do at the weeks, you know, the days before death, what to do the hours before death, what to do at the time the breath stops, what to do when the mind leaves the body, and then what to do for the 49 days after. It's really practical advice. So this is one of the most precious gifts we can give people. And whether it's our pussycat, as I said, they need to be peaceful as well. They need to be hearing mantras. There's so many ways we can help people at the time of death, whether they're Buddhist or not, you know. And so all the advice in the book is so practical. It's such a helpful. And the thing is, you know, like my friend, as she said, I didn't know what to do. She was so shocked. It's because we don't want to think about it. But if the information is there and we know how to help, and we know what death is, and we know what's important, it's so, so important. So the first one, like I said, is to live our lives in the framework of good ethics so that when we do die, we'll be ready for it because our mind will be peaceful and virtuous and we can be content. We won't have regrets. We'll know we'll die peacefully and we'll be happy that our virtuous karma, which we've planted all our lives, will ripen and we'll get another decent human birth and keep on moving, like I said. But the real one is to help others. But you only can help others if you can help yourself first, isn't it? So the general one of impermanence is to live your life in the framework of impermanence. And given that it's the karma I create that is the most important thing, then you live your life in the framework of living in ethics, which is abiding by the laws of karma. This is the best way to prepare for death. So now let's look at the process itself, you know. Already it's half-assed. 30 minutes gone. Just as well I talk fast, isn't it? Fit plenty of information in. So, okay, then. So let's look at let's talk about the death process itself. It's very fascinating, you know. It's, as I said, it's from the Vajrayana and it's described in 8 stages, but each of those stages about 5 things happen. So it's in total about 25 things, you know. 8, 5, 8, 35, maybe 35 steps, but each of the first 4 stages. So the first 4 stages of this death process, this is when the gross consciousness, from this framework, they talk about gross consciousness, which is your sensory consciousness. That's your grossest level of consciousness, your sensory consciousness. And that's what goes in the first 4 stages of death. And then the next 4 is when your mental consciousness, which is more subtle. And it's crucial from the Buddhist perspective to understand the difference between sensory consciousness and mental consciousness, okay? So the sensory is you've got your eye consciousness, your ear consciousness, your nose consciousness, tongue and tactile. So the very first stage of death is each of these different components begins to cease. So we've made it the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, water. Okay, in modern science, we no longer talk about earth, air, fire, water, but it's still in the Ayurvedic system, in the Chinese system, and certainly in the Tibetan medical system, and for sure in the Vajrayana, we're made of the 4 elements. So then you've got your earth element. So the very first stage of death, the first of the elements to cease is the earth element. And the sign of this happening, they say, is, you know, and oh, by the way, so interesting to remember that the process of going to sleep is exactly the same as the process of dying. It's exactly the same. That's why the great yogis can use their sleep and their dreams as part of their meditation process, you know. So, you know, yourself, when you're very tired, the first sign of your tiredness is your body feels very heavy, isn't it? So then this is the first of the 4 or 5 things that occur at the first of the 8 stages. Your earth element starts to cease. Your body becomes very heavy. Even they say that you feel your body's sinking into the bed, you know, you sort of, and you almost want to hold on. This is the very first sign. The same time, the eye consciousness goes. So, you know, yourself, if you're very tired, and I can be sitting there talking to Julie, and then all of a sudden your eyes are kind of glazing over and you can't see very well and you feel very tired. That we all know that experience. And this is exactly the same at death. So your earth element ceases, the eye consciousness, this is in the course notes, by the way, in chapter 5 or 6, I think. The 8 stages of death. Your eye consciousness begins to glaze over, and then they say there's a certain kind of wisdom. They call it the capacity, mirror-like wisdom, which is the capacity to see a lot of things very clearly. That starts to go. And then they say there's this inner subtle sign that occurs, and they label each of these 8 stages in terms of that subtle sign. And this one, they call it the sign, a vision of a mirage. And so it's the interplay of the earth element ceasing, and now the next element is the water element. And as we know, a mirage is like interplay between earth and water. So this occurs, and this occurs every time you go to sleep. But I mean, who remembers it? Nobody, you know. So this is why if we meditate on this process, you can become familiar with it. So when it happens at death, even a little bit, you can be a little bit aware of it, you know. Then the second stage, and this can happen quite quickly, or it can happen very slowly. But in general, this death process, it's talked about usually in terms of starting about a couple of hours before you stop breathing. It could be longer and could be shorter, depending on the person who's dying. So the second stage is your water element ceases. Your liquids in your body begin to dry up. Your ear consciousness goes. Now, we all know this. There I am talking to Julie, and I'm really tired. And suddenly, I'm still sitting up straight, but I missed the last 15 seconds of what she said. We all have that experience because your ear consciousness, it begins to cease. You know, the eyes are going, the ears are going, your water element, your earth element. And then there's this subtle sign that they say it's like kind of like smoky interplay between water and the next element, which is fire. And then the next one, and then each of these stages, these wisdoms all go too. But never mind, we'll keep it simple. The third one is the earth, and what goes is the aggregates. You know, the 5 aggregates. Each of those ceases at this point. So the third stage is the fire element. The heat in the body begins to cease, either from the crown down or from the feet up. Everything is gathering to the heart chakra. So in order to give us a bit of a context here, I should have done that first. We have to remember in the Vajrayana, we've got, like I said before, we've got the gross consciousness, which is your sensory consciousness, which is completely related to your physical body. Then you've got the subtle consciousness, which is your mental states, and that's got a subtle level of physicality as well. And that's this subtle nervous system made up of 74,000 subtle channels. This is in the Vajrayana system, you know, the Tibetan medical system is the same. Within those channels are all this wind energy or prana, coursing through those channels, and inextricably linked to all those wind energies is your different states of mental consciousness. So, you know, you go to your Tibetan doctor, she'll feel your pulses and she will feel the certain wind energies imbalanced, and she will know it's related to your attachment, because the winds are inextricably linked to our different states of mind. And so they're very interconnected. And you know, it's the same as the Chinese system. You can feel the wind energy unbalanced because it's related to your attachment or to your anger or whatever. So the subtle consciousness, that starts to happen at the 5th stage, and that's linked to the subtle wind energy, the channels, and then you've got and all those channels going through our body, and then they're all constricted at different points, which are called chakras. There's a whole bunch of constricted channels at the crown, at the brow, at the throat, at the heart, below the navel, and then what they call the secret chakras, which are along the penis for the male, and then internally in the central channel. The central channel goes down from the crown to the tip of the penis or to the tip of the cervix for the female. This is subtle physiology, basically, you know. And these great yogis know all about this, and these Tibetan doctors. So the very first stage of death, earth element, then the water element, then the fire element, and then finally the air. So by the 4th stage, your eyes have gone, your ears have gone, your nose consciousness has gone. And the 4th stage, your tactile and your tongue cease, the tongue consciousness. And as one of my lamas said, that tongue, they say it shrinks and gets very short and blue at the root. He said that tongue that has spent its life gossiping is now useless. So by the 4th stage, your tongue consciousness and your tactile consciousness. Now, and then you stop breathing. Now, of course, this is the major point, and this is a crucial point to understand in helping people, is that's the point at which, from the Western materialist physical, you know, point of view, that's when death is. But that's only the gross consciousness has ceased. But the mental consciousness, the subtle consciousness, they call it, the next level is subtle consciousness, that is still there. And this becomes a major point in terms of how to help people, how to be after the breath stops. And certainly it really impacts upon taking organs out of people. And we'll go into this. Because in the book, once the breath has stopped, then there's various chapters on what to do if your loved one dies at home, what to do if your loved one dies in hospital, what to do if your loved one dies quickly, what to do if your loved one is giving their organs. And because, I mean, the practices are all the same, but it's really crucial to know what to do when, you know. And so, of course, the biggest problem with giving organs is that from the materialist point of view, by the time you stop breathing, you're called dead, and they plug you up, and you want to give your organs, which is marvelous, then they keep you breathing. But as far as they're concerned, you are a dead person. But very clearly, from this perspective, the Buddhist view, you are not dead. And as Lama Zopa says in the book, you know, if you can still breathe and your heart can still beat, then your consciousness has to be there. You can't have an actual dead body breathing, not possible. And a dead body, by definition, is a body from which the mind has left. So this is a crucial point to keep in mind, you know, especially the one about giving organs. And we'll go into this. So, and also in terms of how to help, because once you stop breathing, then, you know, okay, one of the key things to help your loved one die, including your pussycat, is to have a very conducive condition, like a really peaceful room. It should be very beautiful. You know, it should be quiet, because as your mind's getting more sick, and if you're growing gradually towards the death process, your mind gets very, very sensitive. Your grosser consciousness is beginning to sort of be less functional, and you're getting closer to your subtle consciousness. And so people who are sick and old and dying become very, very sensitive to even the tiniest movement, to the tiniest noise, you know. So often when we think a person's in a coma, and this is again a crucial point, when you're in a coma, it's your gross consciousness has ceased. It's just like you're asleep, but you're in a dream state. The dream state, the coma state, and even this process in death is the same. It's your subtle consciousness is still functioning, and you can still be very aware of what's going on. So one of the main things when we're working with the dying and the old, the dying, is you make it very, very peaceful. The tiniest sound can be really distressing. And this is from one perspective, you could say that dying in a hospital is about the worst way to die. With great respect to dear kind doctors and nurses who are so kind and loving, but it's the most distressing environment because it's noisy and banging doors and machines, other people's emotions, there's noise. The most important thing is you need a peaceful environment. And if you've got a person that you're working with every day who's dying slowly, you need to make the room so beautiful. Not sick rooms are often cluttered and messy, you know. It should be a very beautiful environment so that when they open their eyes, they can see everything is nice and orderly and it's very peaceful. And this is the point as well. Because we do have the senses, and the Buddhist perspective is everything you see, hear, taste, touch, smell, but especially these two senses, hearing and seeing, everything we see and hear leaves a karmic imprint in the mind. So you want your loved one to die peacefully. And let's say, if you're a Buddhist, for example, you'd have Buddhist images. When they open their eyes, they see the picture of their guru. They see the picture of the Buddha. They see the picture of Tara. When they're listening, they hear the Tara mantra. They hear the Medicine Buddha mantra. It's so important, you know. This is a crucial way to help, including your pussycat. I mean, to have your pussycat die slowly, not just go to the vet and have them killed, but you play mantras, you keep them in a safe place. This attracts the Buddhas to come there and to totally bless their mind and to help them get a peaceful rebirth as well. You know, it's so important. And when we understand that just when you stop breathing, when you're in a coma, that you think, oh, they're not conscious, they don't notice and don't match, and you chat away in the sick room. No, you make it as peaceful as possible. Lama Zopa says, I can't stress this enough. What goes on in that room should be only what's of benefit to the dying person. You should be peaceful, have prayers playing, have images so they see them. So when they do stop breathing, and then for the next 3 days, this is the point, because the subtle consciousness can take up to 3 days to leave the body. And there's ways of checking on this, and all this is in the book, you know. And that's a really crucial period when you can do practice. 24 in the monasteries and places, and sometimes 24 hours a day people rotate, come in, and you can do that with your grandmother or your Buddhist sister. You can come and have people coming throughout the day doing prayers and practices. And as Lama Zopa says, the only thing that should happen in that room is the sound of mantras, the sound of prayers, the sound of teachings. It's so important. And that's once they stop breathing, or if they're in a coma even, you know. And this is the point about, we all know there are people have experiences of when they're dreaming, they can be very vividly aware of what's going on. And this is also true about when people, there's a very interesting book I read when I was editing this book. It was by an American medical journalist. He's a very funny guy, and his expertise is death. And his name is Nick Teresi, and it's called The Undead. And he's very funny, and it's all about the contradictions and obstacles and problems now in the American medical profession in relation to when is death. And it's all related to the thing of cutting out organs, you know. And it's a very marvelous book. He's very funny, like I said. But there's really beginning to be doubt now about when death is. I mean, one doctor who's in this profession, he said in the book, he quoted, he said, I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain I don't know what it is, but this I can say. And one of the pieces of all this evidence that this man had in the book, he had a whole chapter on people who have so-called out-of-body experiences while they're on the operating table, you know? And so, of course, most of the people in the profession just are cynical. Don't be ridiculous, because they report exactly what they're seeing. They heard what the doctors were saying, and they just say, don't be ridiculous, not possible. But he quoted one woman in the book, he was very funny about it, who had to have such a radical procedure that from the perspective of the medicos, there was no way she could be conscious, but she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience, completely every word the doctor said, exactly the instruments they used. So you can't argue with these things. You just can't argue with people's experiences. So that's too shocking. When you have a very strong view that the mind is the brain and there's brain dead, and then you hear that the person knows what's going on, you're really shocked and you've got to think about it. And that's why that doctor, he said, I can say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain, but I don't know what it is. At least that. So at least people are questioning. And I think it's marvelous, you know. But so this is what was so fascinating. You see, if you take this death process, and I've just said the first four very briefly, once your gross consciousness has ceased, your sensory, then actually your breath will stop, for sure. And there is no sign of life, as we call it that. But from this perspective, your subtle consciousness, which is your mental consciousness, that's still there. And in other words, if you go into a coma, it's exactly the same. You're not conscious through your senses, but you're not dead yet. You're still breathing, but your mental consciousness is still there. And I remember reading about one Italian mother who wouldn't let them pull the plug on her boy. They kept him alive for 25 years. And he came out, it was reported, he came out of his coma and he said he was totally conscious the whole time. This is mind-blowing, you know. So the mental consciousness, which is all your thoughts and feelings and emotions, that's mental consciousness. That's why people who have vivid dreams, you know, and people report out-of-body experiences. Your mind doesn't leave your body, but that's the way you have the experience. And I remember vividly one retreat I did, you know, I'm not much of a meditator, but it was 3 months, so something has to happen. But I remember vividly having these it was in Dharamsala in India, and then it's rainy season. We'd have our you know, our nap in the afternoon. And I remember this 1 week, my mind was crystal clear. I'd go to sleep, but with my dreams, I had vivid dreams, but I was also completely conscious of everything going on around me. I could hear the people talking, what was going on in the kitchen, the banging of the pots. So that's what your mental consciousness can do. That's why people have out-of-body experiences. In people in dreams, they have clairvoyant experiences. That's your mental consciousness. So a person on the operating table, their mental consciousness can still be very vividly aware. So this particular, he reported, this one woman, she was offering her organs. And as Lama Zopa says, it's the most marvelous thing to do, to offer your organs, but you've got to be careful, you know, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I'll explain why now, because if it's at the time of death, where before you stop breathing, is when the karmic seed is triggered that will determine your next life. And if you die with a virtuous mind, that triggers a virtuous karmic seed, which means you'll get a human birth, at the very least. So then if you disturb the body after that, then that could freak the person out, and that could change the karma. They could then die with panic, and then that triggers a negative seed, and then they get a lower realm rebirth. That's the danger. So this particular woman was quoted in the book, this nurse. There's this woman who was offering her organs, who was kept alive, you know, breathing. She's on the operating table, and the nurse who was monitoring the heartbeat said that the moment they got the circular saw to cut her open, her heart went from 100 to 200 beats a minute. And the author, I remember, he joked and said, I wonder what a dead person has to worry about. But we can deduce very clearly, taking this model as our hypothesis, that her mental consciousness, like those other people, even though she's technically dead, is still there, and she's seeing what they're doing. And so she's freaking out and thinking, oh my God, what are they cutting me open for? I'm not dead yet. So that can cause her, then when they do open her up and her mind leaves the body, that can cause her to have a non-virtuous karmic seed triggered because she's freaking out, and get a lower realm rebirth. And that's the danger. That's the danger. That's the one reason to think carefully about whether you give your organs. It's a marvelous thing to do, but if they disturb your body and therefore your mind is disturbed, it could cause you to change the karma and get a lower realm rebirth because your mind freaks out. That's the danger. It doesn't mean everybody. I mean, many people, I've had operations, I wasn't conscious, people who die might not have that experience, but that's why you've got to be careful. That's the big danger, So anyway, with this death process, first your senses, the earth element, all the elements cease, and then you stop breathing. And so now your mental conscious, and that's described in the next 4 stages. It's all a bit esoteric, but we won't go into it too much here. There's not much time. But basically, all your mental states cease, and it gets ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, until you get to the 8th stage. You get to the 8th stage of death. And what's that book you've got there? Joy. That looks like the Joy. That one. Oh, yeah, you know what? Okay, that's very interesting. This book is the first version of the book I'm describing now, but it wasn't well edited, so it's a bit confusing. But that's the same book I'm talking about. But How to Face Death Without Fear is a better construction of all the information. That's a bit confusing, but it's all there, Joy. It's all there. It's wonderful. So the second stage is the next stage. They talk about different things occurring, different visions occurring. And the 8th stage is called the clear light mind. So in other words, it's a gradual deconstruction of all the grosser and then the subtler levels of both the physicality and the mental states. And then the yogis, and that's the point about why death is what the yogis have been waiting for, all their lives in doing their sadhana practices, doing their great meditations, they're going through this process, their own selves, going to this very subtle level. And why that's important is because the subtlest level of mind, the clear light mind, that's the most capable level of our mind. And because you're not encumbered by any of the grosser delusions. There's no longer any of the grosser levels of mind. There's no longer any of the grosser sensory consciousness. When you are a yogi and you can go through the process of death and get to the very subtle level, when you can get to that very subtle clear light level, you can then sit and meditate for days, hours, days, and even weeks. The greatest yogis can do that. And they're basically getting enlightened at that point, because that very subtle level of mind is the most potent, the most capable. And that's why death is what the yogis have been waiting for. So it's very technical. It's not mystical. It's not kind of all goody-goody. It's a very technical thing. It's very marvelous, actually. So all the instructions are there from these incredible lamas, So the 8 stages of death, when you're familiar with that yourself, you can learn to meditate on it, imagine going through it. You can read it, and one of the parts of advice in this book, there's like 87 different practices, all numbered in the back of the book. And there's all these different practices you can do to help your loved ones. But that means, of course, as Lama Zopa says, now I'm back to helping your loved ones. I'm not watching the clock here. Okay, I've said a lot of things already. So I think I'd like 10 minutes of questions based on what I've discussed so far. I mean, I've tried to fit in as much as I can. So I'm going against Julie's ways of doing things. I'm such a bossy girl. I'm so sorry. But I'd love you put your little mechanical hand up. And if you have any questions, we'll do 10 minutes of questions now, and then we'll go back to the rest of the teaching. So ask me some questions, please.
As a bodhisattva, why would I pray to be born in Dewa Chen?
Good.
Don't I want to continue to come back in a physical body as long as beings remain per Shanti Deva?
Yeah, it's a perfect question. Absolutely perfect. And that's exactly the feeling I had initially, and I didn't want to know about the boring old Pure Lands, So the reason is very simple, and there's a chapter in the book that, as well, certainly Tsongkhapa, but even Guru Rinpoche would say, if you're going to pray to be born in a Pure Land, pray to be born in Amitabha's Pure Land, Sukhavati, Dewa Chen, the land of joy. Why? Is because the only Pure Land, pretty much, that's available to ordinary people. So this is the point here, even forget the bodhisattvas. So listen to this, that this is the one Pure Land that's available to ordinary people. You don't have to have high realizations to be born there. And the only reason, as a bodhisattva, or even even a trainee bodhisattva, which is us, the only reason to get born there is because you can get enlightened quickly, and so that you can then come back quickly to the human realm and benefit sentient beings. That's the only reason, and that's practical. Because let's face it, if you're living in this Pure Land, you've got a body of light. You don't need to sleep, eat, drink, have sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You can spend 24 hours of your blissful time in the Pure Land getting enlightened, and then you can come back down to when you want. That's the only reason. There's no other reason. No other reason. That's it. And that's what made sense to me. And now, like I said before, I'm a fan now And every night before I go to sleep, I put on when I lie down after my practice, I put on my iPad or my phone, I click on the prayer that Lama Zopa wrote, certainly in our tradition, about 10 minutes, me saying the prayer to be reborn in Amitabha's Pure Land. So I'm having it into my mind every time I go to sleep. So I can be born in the Pure Land and get enlightened quickly. So I can come back as a human to benefit others. That's the only reason. So it's a very good question. Go on then, Julie.
Please discuss practicing to arrive in Sukhavati.
Okay, Lama Zopa mentions it's so practical, it's a joke. It's so practical. One of the first causes, and this almost seems ridiculous to us, but it's the meaning of karma. The first cause is to want to go there. This sounds so hilarious. Of course, it's not the only one. It's a bit like anything. If I want to, go on a holiday, to go to Italy for my vacation, the first thought has to be, I want to go to Italy. It's so logical. That's the meaning of karma. As Lama Zopa says, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought. So you got to want. I want a human realm. I want a human body. And then what you have to do if you want a human body is create the causes. So live in virtue, practice virtue, live in your vows, do purification, and then guaranteed karma takes care. You'll get a human body, Second, if you want to be born on the Pure Land, you make the aspiration. One of the first causes is wanting to be there. You think about the Pure Land. You look at all the qualities of the Pure Land. And then, of course, you have to practice virtue again. You create the causes to be born there, which is strongly wanting, connecting with Amitabha Buddha, doing Amitabha practice, saying Amitabha's mantra, thinking of the benefits, and then you're programming your mind. Karma's programming your mind, that's all. So you program your mind, and if everything goes well and you die well, then Amitabha will pick you up at the time of death and zap you there. You'll get there and you'll be able to practice. But also, of course, you do poa, And as Rechungpa, Milarepa's disciple, said, if you've done your poa, and depending on the success at the signs of your meditation, the moment you die, Amitabha you'll fly. What did he say? You said you'll go straight to you'll fly like an eagle to Amitabha's Pure Land. So you create the cause. When we have more confidence in karma, our trouble is, because we've come from the Christian or the Jewish or the creator religions, we tend to think of it as a bit like punishment and reward, which is very infantile. Karma is this amazing concept. It's a natural law. It runs the universe. So living according to the law of karma knows that you means that you are in charge. So you have to feel that I've got to create the cause. What kind of damn rebirth do I want? Don't just cross your fingers and think someone will take care of you. You create the cause to go there. You live according to virtue, do all the things. You tick the boxes, and then you die happily, and the result will come. Karma takes care, as Lama Yeshe says, What else, Julie?
Someone is asking if the book of Lama Yeshe's book is translated into French.
It is indeed. It's by Lama Zopa, and it indeed is in French. Yes, it is in French. Exactly. It is in French. Yes.
Okay. The next question is the probability of having support at the time of death related to the combined karma of the dying person and the one helping the dying person?
Yeah, that's a very good point. But that's very good. Yes, because for sure, all our relationships, they're karmic, So, but I think the main thing is for oneself is if we know that living our lives in virtue, living in our vows, keeping our pure samaya, staying close to our teachers, doing our practices, abiding by the laws of karma, and then consciously knowing you want to have a good death, and by taking care of people ourselves, guaranteed you will be taken care of at the time of death. You will have a perfect death. It's not mystical. You don't have to sort of sign up contracts with people to do it. If you're really living your life virtuously, working on your own mind and helping others when they're sick, helping others when they're poor, helping the dying, guaranteed you will get everything you need at the time of your death, I think. And secondly, the people who are going to, as Lama Zopa says, there needs to be a very good karmic connection between the person you're helping at the time of death. You need to know their mind. If you're the helper, you need to know their mind well. You need to know what they need, and you need to be caring, you need to be loving, you need to really want to help them. So to have that kind of help is very, very precious, and it's the greatest gift we can give people. When I think of old people's homes, you're just drugged out of their brains and got television blaring, no one takes care, people all living in fear, dying in fear, never thought about death in their lives. It's so unbearable. And I think even if the cleaning lady lady is kind. One kind word to that old lady in the bed, holding her hand, telling her you love her, is the most precious gift you can give to somebody, you know. But yes, you need a very good karmic connection with somebody, and you need to create the cause yourself, not be fearful to want to take care of other people. Guaranteed you'll be taken care of. You will get everything you need. I feel very confident about that. That's natural law of karma, you know. That's my feeling, Julie.
Someone wants to review again. Are you saying that Buddhism doesn't believe in organ donation?
No, I'm not saying such words even in the slightest. It's not even a question of Buddhism doesn't believe. What I'm trying to say is trying to show the difficulty that could arise by giving your organs. So, this is Lama Zopa. I mean, I remember one time a friend of mine who started a hospice supporting program in Australia 40 years ago. He interviewed lamas from all the 4 traditions, and every one of them had such praise for people who want to give their organs. And Lama Zopa is exactly the same. He said it's almost equivalent to being like a bodhisattva, that you decide you're going to offer your organs. From the point of view of the person doing it, it's the most precious practice. But the point that I'm pointing out, and Rinpoche points out, and I'm pointing it out more specifically from the reading I've done, because of this obstacle, even in the West, it's considered an obstacle now, that, you know, because they now can see you don't know when death is. So if the karmic seed that will determine your next birth is triggered at the time before you stop breathing, and if when you stop breathing your mind is still in your body, the mental consciousness, and if when you stop breathing you've offered your organs, they plug you up to the machine and then they put you on the operating table, and then you're like that woman who we can deduce was observing with her mental consciousness that they had the circular saw, and that freaks her out, and then when they cut her open, her mind then leaves her body. That could shift the virtuous karma that was triggered before she stopped breathing, which determined she was going to get a good rebirth. Because she freaked out at that point, that the karma could shift and a negative karmic seed could now be triggered, and then when she leaves her body, she'll get a lower realm rebirth. That's the one and only danger, is what I'm saying. So it's got nothing to do with believing or not believing, and this is not a Buddhist statement. This is very specifically from Lama Zopa, and it's very specifically in the framework of describing these 8 stages and the difficulties that could be caused for the person who's dying if they've offered their organs, that their mind could be disturbed, which could cause them to get a suffering rebirth. That's the very specific point.
If the person you are helping die is Christian,
yeah,
is it more appropriate to have Christian prayer, a picture of Christ, etc.?
Totally perfect point. I see you, Linda. I'll come in a second, Linda. I'll talk to you in a minute, darling. This is really good. In Rinpoche's book, of course, he said you've got to know the person. So, you know, there's all this, there's all the different chapters, what advice, things to talk about, then mantras to say, prayers to say, different things to do at different stages. So it's obvious you have to know the person well. So with your Catholic mummy, you don't blar on about Buddha and listen, you talk about one of the things about to talk about. So there's your mummy. She's Christian, she's Catholic, but maybe she hasn't been thinking about God much lately and she's worried. You talk to God, you talk to her about God. Mummy, God loves you. You talk about how beautiful heaven is, so she can learn to calm down and remember God and remember heaven, and that can help her die peacefully. You do what's appropriate for the person. If it's a Hindu, you have Hindu images. You be intelligent, you be useful. But this also doesn't mean you can't do things like mantras. For some reason, mantras, everybody seems to like them. They're lovely sound, and it can be such a peaceful sound, even if your mummy's a Catholic. You can still say mantras, but you have to be appropriate. You have to know what they need and what they want. Many people tell you what they want. Many people say, I don't want you to talk, be silent. So you've got to be very sensitive to the needs of the person and do what's appropriate, to them. That's a really important point.
Can we read for animals from the same text as we would for a human, or is there a special text for animals?
Yeah, no. Any prayers or mantras. So, in Rinpoche's book, he's got like 87 different practices, various sutras, lots and lots of different mantras, lots of different prayers to do. So just hearing anything, mantras are probably the best thing, Mantras, I've seen so many examples of people with their animals you know, the dog is distressed and dying, and the vet suggests you should put the animal down. Like a friend of mine, she was really worried about upsetting the dog, and she just started to decide, and she started playing the medicine Buddha mantra for the dog to hear it. She said she could not believe it. He relaxed, he was calm, and he just seemed more peaceful, and he died very peacefully. Because you see, and this is where we have to understand attachment. It's the first time I've said this word, I think. This is huge in Buddha's teachings. And the main reason we suffer and have fear at the time of death is because of attachment. So what attachment is a huge fear of losing something. The fear of, it's also looking forward to something. It's worried about things, anxiety, panicking. All of this is attachment. And especially at death, the most powerful attachment at death is clinging onto this body, the thing we're most attached to, terrified of letting go. People all talk like that. This is the worst suffering at the time of death. So the same with animals. Fear is coming from intense attachment. So there's your little pussycat or your dog, and it's, you know, and okay. The other thing about attachment is this. Attachment also wants to hold on to something. Attachment needs an object. So that's what happens when in old people's homes, they have the television blaring. They say, oh, it distracts them. Well, no, your attachment just grasps onto anything. And so that keeps you agitated. It keeps you all the time kind of, you know, that's why they talk about not letting go. So I remember one lady I went to visit who was dying, and she was really worried, really anxious. She was tossing and turning, and their friends would always have the television on. So as soon as attachment's there, attachment wants to hold on to anything. So that can only be distressing. And so what happened was, this is one example, she wanted to watch a video of Lama Yeshe. Not video, but the previous day, the tape, you know. So I left them a tape, and then when I left, they told me later they put it into the television, but the television broke. So she couldn't even watch television. So because it was quiet, her attachment was able to calm down, and she died peacefully. You know, another person, you know, you can be in one friend who was rostering to take care of a dying person. And she had Patsy Cline music singing, and the dogs and the cats coming in and out, everybody chatting and chatting. Well, that energizes attachment energy. And it's so they look like it's happiness, but it's diverting their mind, distracting them. So given that we do have attachment, why not give the attachment something virtuous to hold on to by playing mantras? It can instantly, it's peaceful. The attachment can hold on to it, but it focuses the mind. It calms the mind down because it's such a powerful sound. So this little dog became so peaceful, and it was, instead of the poor dog's mind being distracted and can't do anything with its mind, you give it the mantra, all the little dog's mind focused, sort of absorbed into the mantra and became calm. So it's very skillful, just to say mantras, to have it very quiet, or to say mantras. It's the most beneficial thing. And even when you're in a coma or in a dream, or very in a coma, a friend of mine in Sydney years ago was in a deep coma in the hospital, and her husband asked me to go. So I went at night because you can drive more quickly, and very late at night, and I was in the ER. And they knew a Buddhist nun was coming. It was very funny. And when I arrived, they said, oh, please don't ring bells. And I promised I wouldn't ring any bells. So I sat there next to my friend Judy. She was completely wired up, totally unconscious. And I just said mantras. And every now and again, because she was very close to His Holiness Sakya Trinzen, very close to Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche. And before I went to the hospital, I had asked the students of these lamas to please ask the lamas to pray for Judy. So every now and again, I'd say in Judy's ear, Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen's praying for you. Judy, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. So she was in a coma for weeks. They didn't think she'd come out. She came out of her coma, and I went to visit, and she said the only thing she could remember, and she didn't know it was me, was this blue lady coming through the window saying exactly those words. Now, I'm sorry, I told nobody. You can't argue with things like that. So just the power of these lamas' holy names and the power of sound, the power of the gurus and the Buddhas, it gets them to come there and bless the mind of the beings, you know. It's so beneficial. Mantras and prayers, because it's related to the Buddhas, you know, I mean, when the mind is more subtle, you can be aware of it because your grosser senses have ceased, you know. So even if you're in a coma, well, the main thing is to be quiet, and people can be conscious, you know, this is the point. can be conscious at a subtle level. And then why not give them the Buddhas and the animals as well? It's so beneficial, you know. Do you understand, people?
There's
Yes.
more
Good.
questions.
Keep going. Yeah.
How do you help non-believers?
Okay, that's the interesting point. So obviously, if your grandma's a communist, you don't talk about Jesus, you don't talk about heaven, you don't talk about mantras, but she might like, I mean, some people like music, and she might know it's called Buddhist, but if it's a lovely sound, I mean, people love the sound, you know, for some reason, of Tibetan monks chanting. I mean, you've got to know what she likes. So that's one thing. But the other one is maybe you play some Bach. She might love Bach. I mean, you know, Bach has this beautiful music that's very religious. Or you might even, but if she's still conscious, then you talk about, one of the key ones is to talk to the person about their good qualities. This sounds so silly, but we all know we never think of our good qualities. We only think of our bad. And if you're dying, you get even more neurotic. You get guilty and worried. You toss and you turn. I'm a bad person. What have I done wrong? But you talk to the person about their good qualities, what a good mother they are, what a good father, what a good grandmother. You praise them, and you lift their heart. And if their mind is lifted, they can be peaceful. There's many ways you can help, you know, many ways you can help. You've got to know the person's mind well, you know, to understand.
What is Venerable's view of physician-assisted deaths?
Well, this is the interesting point, you see. You see, again, it's not a question of believing or not believing in anything. We've got to look carefully at the facts. So I'm discussing the Buddhist view here. That's all I'm doing. You know, I'm asking you to believe it. So this is the point. It's not a moralistic issue. Oh, you shouldn't kill somebody. It's a practical issue. It's the same as the person taking their organs or not, that we've got to look at the dangers for the person who's dying. If their mind is disturbed, that can shift the karma. A negative karmic seed could be triggered, which could then throw them into a very suffering rebirth. That's the point about the danger. Now, the same here. So listen, this is an important point. Okay, thank you. It's a very good question. So let's look at this. Okay. When we do any action, and every second of the day we're doing an action, in order for that action or karma to be what they call a complete karma, there need to be 4 things in place in order to do it. So now, here the example is called, with using blunt words, killing somebody. Okay. Now, normally we would say killing is not good. But why is it not good? Because we all know the usual reason you kill is out of anger or attachment. You're very rarely going around have wars out of love and compassion. The Russians are not killing the Ukrainians out of compassion, and nor are the Ukrainians killing the Russians out of compassion. Get my point? It's obvious that an action called killing is very harmful to others. But then the whole point is, when the person themselves does the killing, why the hell do you do it? It's out of anger. So we'll look at the karma you personally are creating when you kill. 1, you harm another person, but 2, you're harming yourself because you're programming your mind with anger and the wish to kill. This is a terrible thing to do to yourself. So in general, killing is called negative, but let's look at an action of killing. And there's 2 scenarios. So one is, let's say me, I've got just a mouse, forget the person, the mouse in the kitchen. And then there's Julie with a mouse in her kitchen. So in each case, the same thing is the object. There has to be a living being. So in each of our cases, it's a living being. It's called a mouse. Now, the second of the 4 components in place is the crucial piece. This is your mind involved in it. And there's 2 parts. One is intention. Julie says, I will kill the mouse. And then the second part of that is her motivation. Let's say in her case, it's compassion for the mouse. Get my point? This is the point now. Oh my God, the poor mouse is suffering. I must kill it. So the second part is Julie's mind involved. Intention is I will kill the mouse, but the reason is compassion because she doesn't want the mouse to suffer. My case is a typical example of killing. Intention to kill the mouse. Why? Anger. How dare there be a disgusting mouse in my kitchen? So the second component is different. Her motivation is a good motivation, compassion, and mine is a typical negative one. It's called anger. The third is the same step. She kills the mouse, I kill the mouse. The fourth is the same, dead mouse. So roughly that's the 4 components. Object, your mind involved, you do the action, and the result of dead mouse. It's the same in both of us, but the radical difference in Julie's case is her motivation was compassion. So now you could argue the karma she creates is not so negative because her motivation is the key point. So from Julie's point of view, killing the mouse, you could say she doesn't create much negative karma. From my point of view, sure, heavy negative karma, because I wanted to harm the mouse and I killed the mouse, I increased the habit to kill, and I increased my anger. So for me, terrible karma. But this is the point in Julie's example. Whether it's her grandmother or the mouse, she doesn't create much negative karma because her motivation, she meant well. But excuse me, folks, listen to this. As Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. As His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. So now let's look at the mouse she killed or her grandma. So this is the point now. This is the point. One, for her own sake, she's okay. But what about your grandma? So given that the Buddha's view is her grandma's consciousness will continue when Julie kills her. Two, as we've just described, because when, okay, and we haven't described it, the karmic seed that is in your grandmother's mind at the time you kill her will be the seed that will determine your grandmother's future rebirth. This is the point. Everybody gets reborn. It's just a default. So now, is Julie clairvoyant? Can she see with absolute clarity that when she kills her grandma at this moment, that her grandma has a virtuous karmic seed that will be triggered, that will cause her grandma to get a really nice human birth so she can carry on her spiritual path? If Julie is not clairvoyant, then don't play Russian roulette with your grandma's mind, please. That's the reason to be cautious about killing somebody. For herself, she meant well. She's fine. It's a bit like Robina's got a headache and Julie says, oh, I've got a pill and she has so much compassion for me. She's got compassion, but she forgets whether her pill is cyanide or aspirin. And she gives me the pill and then I meant well, she said. Meanwhile, I'm dying in agony. Thanks a lot. Keep your pill to yourself. So if you don't have wisdom, which means the wisdom of clairvoyance, to see the mind of your grandmother, you have no right interfering with your grandmother and putting her, playing Russian roulette. That's the bottom line. It's a practical issue, not a moral one. So, of course, it's difficult these days because we're killing ourselves now. Many governments are allowing us to do it. It's not a moralistic issue. It's, do you have the wisdom to be confident that the moment you kill yourself or you initiate the death of someone else, do you have confidence? Do you have confidence that a virtuous karmic seed will be triggered that will ensure you'll get another decent human body? If you don't have it, you do what you can to help the person die peacefully. You don't interfere where you don't have the wisdom. Nobody would interfere if you didn't have the wisdom. You wouldn't intervene in giving me a pill if you weren't certain it was a proper pill. So we understand it when it comes to relative things, but not when it comes to death, So this is the point to try and understand. And I hope I said it quickly, but I hope it's clear. So if you have wisdom, then please kill me right now. If you can be sure I'll get a really good human rebirth, please kill me now. But we don't have that wisdom. Maybe the high beings have that wisdom, but it's so common now. People do it. We know that. We know that. So it's just to be more cautious about it because we don't have the wisdom to be certain. That's the point, And also, as Lama Zopa would say, every second of a human life is worth it because you're purifying, you're creating some virtue and you're purifying. So it's just sort of the main point in Buddhism is to do everything you can to help the person in that scenario to be peaceful and to, as much as you can, allow it to happen naturally, not because it's something innately good about natural. It's just because you don't have the wisdom to intervene. So but it's not it's not an easy one these days because it's so common now. So if more questions come out of that, you're very welcome to ask me. That's the approach. You just out of wisdom. Compassion's not enough. We need wisdom, which is certainty that the person, when you kill them or when you kill yourself, you can be certain that your mind will take another decent rebirth. Of course, if you're a materialist, you don't think that. You just think you're going to turn into dust, isn't it? Well, what can you do? You can't force people. So I've said a few things and I haven't. So let me just finish the death process. Okay, I'll go through the 8 stages. So I won't go into detail of the last 4, but various things occur. By the time you get to the clear light stage, then your mind can stay there for like up to 3 days. And that's where if you're helping somebody, including your pussycat, you'd keep them very peaceful, very quiet. You'd be making prayers, you'd say prayers, you'd have pujas done, you'd say mantras, you'd keep them very peaceful. And then at a certain point, after 3 days, they say pretty much after 3 days, the consciousness will have left. And there are various indications. One of them is that if you put your hand, because what happens is when death process, all the energies mental and physical, all go down towards the heart chakra and come from the feet up to the heart chakra. So what's left at the time of death is just at the heart chakra. If you can still, after 3 days, you can still feel it's very warm just above the chest, just like here, you know, I'm pointing right above the chest in the center. That indicates the mind is still there. So then if it, but after 3 days, it's likely it's gone. Pretty much they say 3 days is maximum. But until you're certain, they would say best to leave for 3 days, you know. But if you're going to have to bury, like I say, one of the examples of helping in the chapter, if your loved one dies in a hospital, and this is where it's really important about hospitals. Hospitals are such kind people, and they'll go out of their way to help you do properly according to your views, you know. So if you're going to be having your grandma die in hospital, then you don't just hand your power over to the doctors and nurses. Their job is to take care of the body, but your job is to take care of her mind. So you'd negotiate in advance with the hospital. You know, you'd say very clearly, if she does die in the middle of the night, don't touch her. Please call me, and you'll come at 3 in the morning, and then you ask them to give you the room as long as possible, if you can, that bed. But if you've only even got half an hour, as Lama Zopa says, you've even got 30 minutes, you say all the prayers and practices, and then what you can do if you have to have the body removed, even one of the things you can do, you can ask to keep it in the fridge. So they'll move the body very gently, and they'll keep it in the fridge for 3 days, and then you can have your prayers and pujas done. So the mind can stay peaceful for that period if the mind hasn't left. But like with one of my friends in Santa Cruz, they had to take the body to the mortuary, and this is our friend had died, and he wanted a Buddhist. He was a Buddhist. And so they put him in very nicely in the ambulance and drove him very carefully to the mortuary. And the mortuary were very kind. They left him on a stretcher. You know, we sat there all day with him and did prayers. And then we asked them, when he put him in the fridge, they put him in the fridge in the night. And we asked if they could please play the Gyuto monk, or the monks chanting, you know. So they said they would. So that means all the dead bodies in the fridge got the Gyuto monks chanting. I thought I was very happy for them. So we came out the next day, we did more prayers. So there's various things you can do to keep the body undisturbed for the 3 days, you know. But if you're going to disturb the body, if you have to move the body, you do what prayers you can, and then what you can do to try and help the consciousness leave more quickly, you can tap on the crown chakra, which is towards the back of the head. If your spine went all the way up to the crown, it's just in front there. That's where the central channel is. So the very subtle mind, the very subtle mind, the clear light mind is at the heart chakra. And it's conjoined with this very subtle red and white drops. And these are 2 subtle energies that come from your mother and father at the time of your conception. Your conception is your mind coming into the egg and sperm of your mummy and daddy at the time the egg and sperm join, which is when conception is. But there's a subtle drops, they call it the red and white bodhicitta, the red and white kundalini. There's a subtle levels of the egg and the sperm, and your very subtle consciousness at conception joins that egg and sperm, and that stays at your heart chakra, the very subtle red and white drop, right down just in the center between your breasts. Well, if you're old, your breasts go down lower, so around about the middle there. So, and at the time of death is when the red and the white open, and your clear light consciousness leaves, and that's when death is. So you could tap up here very strongly, and that could encourage the consciousness to come zapping up the central channel and to leave through the crown chakra, which could help you get a pure land rebirth. They say that's one of the things you can do. So then what happens is then the consciousness leaves the body, and then it goes through the reverse 8 stages, and you wake up in this kind of like a dream state. So the intermediate state is just like a dream state, just like being in a coma, just like being in a dream. You know, it's exactly the same. It's your subtle consciousness, your mental consciousness. So depending on the karmic seed that was triggered determines the quality of that bardo. It could be very fearful. If a negative seed was triggered, it'll be like a nightmare, you know. If a virtuous seed was triggered before you stop breathing, it could be quite a pleasant dream state, and that can last up to 7 human weeks. So basically, in our case, at our past death, the virtuous karmic seed of our own past non-killing was triggered. By the time we even stopped breathing, we were already programmed to go to our present mother's human womb. We died, the mind left the body, we got into the intermediate state, and then when mummy and daddy hopped into bed, and this is the hilarious part, you have to listen to this. when mummy and daddy hopped into bed, or whether they hopped, our consciousness, the karma ripened between us and the mummy and daddy, and our consciousness left the intermediate state, and it was driven by intense attachment. If you're going to be born a girl, you're powerfully driven by intense attachment for your father. And if you're going to be born a boy, you're driven by this intense attachment for your mother. And you get to there, and all you see is the sex organs, and you get pissed off, and then that anger causes you to die from the intermediate state, and your consciousness then jumps in and joins the egg and sperm. And as Lama Zopa says, it is clear that samsara is created by attachment. It's not some sacrament from God, I promise. It's all driven by attachment. So that's how you get reborn, okay? Aren't we fortunate getting a human body? And we did the work. It wasn't given us by anybody. And that's the one about karma. The 4 ways our karma ripens. Our human body, due to our past virtue of not killing. All our tendencies, due to those tendencies. We've practiced virtue, not killing, not stealing. How amazing. All the experiences in this life, relatively all the good ones, due to our past virtue. The bad ones, yep, due to our past non-virtue. And even the environmental karma, all due to our past actions. We are the boss, you know. So be in charge of this life, so that when you die, you'll have a happy death. And then you also, on the way, you can help others die well. Okay, let's go. 30 more minutes.
Is it okay to clean the dying body prior to death? Does a clean body have impact on karma?
That's a really good point. Thank you. The main point is that when you go, once you've gone through going through the death process, don't touch the body, because that can disturb the mind easily. The mind, they're very fragile. So when the death process has started, until up to 3 days, as much as you can, you don't touch the body, for sure. Best, even if it's dirty. Of course, if you know the consciousness has left, then sure, make the body clean, but it's not much benefit to the person. It's only, we like the look of it. It's nice. And it is nice to have a nice, clean grandma. But I mean, if she's not dead, if the mind is still there, best not to touch her. Best, because it could disturb her mind. That's the general view, you know.
Does what you said about physician-assisted deaths relate equally to abortion?
Again, it's the same issue, okay? It's the same issue. If we don't have the wisdom. Okay, it is karma is a general law. The Buddha would suggest is a law. He doesn't run it. He doesn't make it up. He's observed it, that runs the universe. It's the law within which minds run. All beings are run by this law of karma, okay? So given that, it's very logical. If there's a natural law called botany, if you don't know botany, you have no right chucking seeds in your garden. You don't know what you're doing. So wisdom is obvious in anything at all, any body of knowledge. If you've got wisdom about those laws, then you can help people. If you don't have wisdom, then you don't act. It's very reasonable. So the thing is, so there's levels of karma. So it's obvious, I would suggest, if you want to take qualitative karma, if a person is a human being who's got a fully developed human being, they're dead, they're alive, and you kill them, that would be heavier than I'd suggest it's a heavier karma than killing a fetus of 12 weeks old in the womb. I would suggest that. But it all depends on the suffering of the being. So, you know, fetuses can suffer terribly if it's 12 weeks old. Okay, I always give an example of my own abortion. I always like to use that example. And it also helps understand karma, you know. I was 23. I was in London, 1968. I was a hippie. And I was a good hippie. I always say that. I slept with lots of boys. That's what hippies did. I'm not joking. I'm not even being sarcastic. I remember this boy. I had sex with him. And I remember, this is also an interesting point. This tells us about conception when it happens. I always tell this story. I was with this boy. He was Australian. I remember that. Doesn't matter. I was stupid details. I was 23. And I remember that second, we're in bed together, that second, I knew I was pregnant. Many women say the same thing. I knew that second. I didn't know those words, but that second, the consciousness with whom I had the karma with, who died a few weeks before, the karmic seed that was triggered in that human being's mind, that person's mind was a human karmic seed, a virtuous karmic seed, and a very personal karmic seed. And then the condition that enabled them to get a human body was me jumping into bed with this boy, and they came running and they zapped into our egg and sperm. And I was vividly clear. one of my friends, she had her daughter and her daughter's husband staying in the house with them while the daughter and the husband's house was being built. They were with their mummy. And the daughter came down for breakfast one morning and said, "Oh, Mum, I'm pregnant." And the mother said, "Oh, fantastic. When did you find out?" 40 minutes ago, she said. So she knew, and many, I think even men know this. So women, very common. So a consciousness went into my womb. That's conception, pretty much at that second. So then why did that person come to my womb? They died a few weeks before. They had, the first karma was a virtuous karma of non-killing that drove them to my womb in particular. We had strong karmic connection. But the other one was, they had the other karma, the third one, called the experience similar to the cause. So one, they got into my womb. The next second, I had the thought, I'm going to have an abortion. So their karma to be killed by me was already triggered. So 12 weeks later, I remember I felt very fortunate because in London, it had just been approved to be part of the national health, the free medical system. I felt so fortunate I could get a free abortion, you know. So that person came to my womb. They had the karma of non-killing to get a human body, but they also had the other karma from their own past killing of me to be killed by me. 12 weeks later, I had an abortion, you know. And then the trouble is the poor little fetus, they didn't cut her out properly, so I had to go back to hospital because they mangled her little 12-week-old fetus, you know, so they had to pull her out again, cut her out again. So I think that's quite intense suffering. Now, what was my motivation? It was not virtue, I promise. It wasn't compassion for my baby. It was attachment. I didn't want a baby, you know. So it can be quite intense, the suffering of a fetus. Depends, you know, it must have been mangled. There must be some sensory consciousness available if it's already 12 weeks old. So the karma we create depends on our motivation. It depends on the suffering of the being. It all depends. It's all like that. So that in general, the Buddhist approach would be, you try not to kill any living being. I mean, you can't stop killing. We live in this world, even if you're a vegetarian, even if you're a vegan, even if you eat fruit, even if you eat the air, you're a breatharian, you're still killing beings. Your body is a walking zoo. Your mouth is an entire ecosystem. Under your arm is an entire zoo, apparently. So we just by existing, and this is the tragedy of samsara, Buddha says, just by existing, we can't help but harm others. So the whole point in Buddhism, broadly speaking, is given that we're living in this world of sentient beings, try to do what we can to refrain from harming, do the best, you know, and try not to consciously harm. The best we can do is that. And that's why, as we know very well, in the Vajrayana system, we have all these purification practices where if you live in vows every day and you do your purification practice of not killing, you're purifying your past killing, purifying your past anger, purifying your past lying, then don't be surprised that you're cleaning up your act so you'll never even meet a situation in which you feel you're forced to kill because you've purified your karma. This is why it's so powerful. One, to live in vows of non-killing, because the vow is so powerful, the Buddha says, even it's like a subtle physical energy visible to clairvoyance. So by living in vows of not killing and not harming, 24 hours a day you have those vows, you're purifying your mind. And second, you do your purification practice and you're cleaning up your act to purify all the weeds you've already planted before they ripen. So that's the best way to live your life. So you won't need to kill anything. You won't need to lie or steal because you've purified. This is why the very first level of practice, right at the first level, you know, is so beneficial. So it's a long answer. I hope it was clear. What else, Julie, darling?
If one has to put an animal to sleep, an animal that seemed quite peaceful at the time he was drugged beforehand, I assume.
Yeah.
What can one do to apologize and or purify for not allowing that blessed animal's karma to evolve?
I understand. Well, my first answer has to be try not to do that. That has to be the first one. Not if you have to. We don't have to do anything. I'm not trying to be rude or fundamentalist, but I'm trying to get us to take responsibility. I'm not trying to say what to do. But when we say, if I have to kill an animal, necessarily you don't have to. We can think differently. So I just want to suggest this. A part of our fear about animals, because we see their suffering, and because now it's very much the world view, most vets will even call you selfish if you don't put your animal to sleep. So we really got to think freshly, take responsibility. And if you have this view of karma, then you want to be as cautious as possible to intervene. But intervention doesn't mean you're intervening properly. You're going to be loving and kind to take care of your animal and let it hear mantras and be peaceful and allow it, and know that if your animal can be peaceful, give it painkillers as much as you can. Try not to intervene to kill it because of lack of wisdom. That's the only thing. But it's not a question, again, of apologizing. It's a question of yourself, your purification. But if you've got compassion, you don't have too much to purify. It's all a question of trying to avoid a situation in which the animal that you killed will go to the lower realms and get a worse rebirth. That's the point about it. But you can't guarantee that if you don't have wisdom. So you do what you can not to harm and do what you can to help the animal be peaceful, to say mantras as much as we can, but driven by the wish not to harm. That's all I can say. Do our best. That's all I can say. Go on. What else?
Exactly at what point do you do POA?
I don't practice it. Go on, sorry.
POA for yourself.
Exactly.
The exact moment to do POA for another person.
I understand, yeah. I don't do it at all, but I know Lama Zopa gives it very clearly in the book. There's 3 different situations. If you've practiced it yourself throughout your life, then you'll know, but because you've been taught when to do it yourself. And if you think about that, to be able to be in such control of your mind already to me implies you're a pretty advanced practitioner. If you're able to be so controlled from your practice of years and years of POA that you're able to do it at the time of your death. You do it obviously when you're conscious and ready. And second, if it's someone else doing it for you, you make sure. I don't know the timing is. I don't know the timing. Rinpoche talks about it very clearly in the book. So I don't know the root of the answers. I can for you. Let me see what Rinpoche says. Okay. I have to find the book first. Where is it? How does I say it? See if I can find it. Not there. Okay. What's this book? What's it called? It's I'll get the old version. No, it's not there either. Oh God. I don't know is the answer. I'm sorry. But if you look up Lama Zopa's book, you have to get the answer then. I'm so sorry. I just can't remember. There's 3 different scenarios. You get your friends to do it. Best is to have a Lama do it. Best is to have a really highly evolved being do it for you. Definitely. And that clearly has to be before the consciousness leaves the body. Obviously, it's got to be after you've stopped breathing. That's when it's got to be. And the lamas a person who's qualified would know exactly when to do. But it's got to be obviously while the consciousness is still there. That's clear, What else there? Do you need something?
How would the choice to voluntarily stop eating and drinking differ karmically from medically assisted suicide?
It's a very good point. So the key, the thing is, this is where even His Holiness says, not even, His Holiness says because it's so common. No, because we've created in our world, I'll get to the exact question, we've created, the irony is in our medical profession, we've created this kind of dilemma for us, haven't we? That we can keep people alive for 25 years. So we've created this terrible dilemma that now forces us to have to bloody well kill them, So this is where the motivation is so important. That's why many people don't want to be kept alive. It's just so unnatural. You understand, in a way, unless there's going to be some quality of life. So the thing is, if you're going to do, the key thing is your motivation. Obviously when you're old, you want to eat less anyway, not everybody. And so then but it all depends on your motivation. If you're going to do it yourself and stop eating and drinking, you do it with the most compassionate motivation. You want a peaceful death. But if you do it with anger or depression or kind of resentment or self-hate, it can never be a benefit. The motivation is the main thing because that's what determines the imprints in your mind, So if even like, for example, His Holiness says, if you're going to spend all that hundreds of millions of dollars, thousands of dollars on keeping machines a person alive, out of compassion, want them to turn the machine off, and then out of compassion, rather use the funds to be of benefit to others. He says, this is marvelous. But the bottom line is always the motivation. The bottom line is the motivation. And then based on as much wisdom as you have, it's practical. Try to think of it as practical.
And this is a takeoff again on that same question.
Yeah.
If it is a death with dignity, assisted death, and the person wants to die and can't improve their karma much more in their current state, then clairvoyance, meaning what you were just discussing, the
Yeah.
clairvoyance of knowing when to do the
Yeah.
poa, is
Yeah.
that no longer an issue, and is it okay?
You wouldn't do poa if the person's not dying. You wouldn't do poa to force the mind out of a living person. Poa is only done once you're aware that you're in the death once you're knowing you're moving towards death. You wouldn't do poa a person who's alive and functioning. You wouldn't, basically that's killing a person. You wouldn't do that. So I missed, so say all the points they said in their question again. Say their points, please.
If it is a death with dignity assisted death and the person wants to die and can't improve their karma much more in their current state, then clairvoyance isn't the issue and it's okay.
You just
Agreed?
said the word poa before. You said the
That
word
was
poa.
I inserted
Oh,
that.
that's
I
okay.
apologize, because
Okay.
clairvoyance would only needed in the case be needed in the case of doing POA, would it not?
No. Okay. Now I see your point. This is really okay. So poa's got nothing to do with poa. Okay, good. So we call it death with dignity. It's a very nice phrase. We call it that, and that's nice. Somebody made it up. Nice marketing thing. Death with dignity. I'm not being sarcastic. Physician-assisted death. We call it all these things. It's true. The whole point. I mean, clairvoyance. Okay. First of all, I mentioned clairvoyance specifically. I mentioned it in two contexts. One was showing that given that we don't have clairvoyance now, when we decide to kill our grandma or kill our pussycat. I say that in a not even be sarcastic, but that's what would give you the wisdom to know exactly the karma of that dog. And only, in other words, only a high being would have that wisdom. Only a high being who's also got compassion would have the wisdom to know when it's best for the dog to die. Only
Well, in
that
this case, they're referring to a human being.
I know that, but I'm talking about both.
Okay.
So the physician-assisted one, as we call it, the whole point about that is the materialist view. Listen, if the Buddhist view is mistaken and consciousness does not continue after death, okay, then I agree it is a perfect thing to do to be in control and kill yourself when you feel ready, because there's no consequence. There's nothing continuing, so there's no consequence. So even if you're angry, it won't matter, because if you disappear into dust, there is no karmic consequence. But if your consciousness does continue, if at the time of death, as this view is saying, a karmic seed that will determine the very precise life that you will get when your mind leaves the body, and if your mind is dying with fear or panic or drama or depression or anxiety or self-hate, it follows logically that it will trigger a negative karmic seed. It follows logically that when you do die, physician assisted, your own assisted, or your brother assisted, then your consciousness will take a really suffering, intense rebirth in the lower realms, animal or spirit or hell being. I'm just giving you the Buddhist big picture view of the universe, you know. So that's the reasoning behind be cautious before you decide to kill somebody, yourself or someone else, because we don't have the wisdom to know what type of rebirth you will get. If you are certain that you're going to get a really good human rebirth, then out of compassion, you know, yogis can die whenever they feel like it. We don't call it suicide. They can decide when the time is to die. They can go into meditation and die blissfully. Honey, child, go for it. It's all a question of the type of rebirth that comes. So if we don't have that wisdom, so this doesn't mean a person who dies naturally will get a human rebirth. And it doesn't mean that a person who's physician-assisted dying doesn't get a human rebirth. It's all a question of knowing or not knowing. It's all a question of having the common sense wisdom to know the consequences of our actions. It's just like, again, the pill. You can have the most intense compassion and give me that pill because you really don't want me to have a headache, but you just forget whether it was cyanide or aspirin, then that's not intelligent. I would rather keep my headache than take the risk because you meant well. So it's a practical issue, and I'm trying to make it all the time the point here. It's a practical issue. And all of this is based on the idea that consciousness continues and the karmic seed that is triggered at the time you begin to die, which is determined by the way you die and the state of your mind, is the one that determines your future life. And it could be a hell being, it could be spirit, it could be animal, or it could be human. It's a big, big, big picture, not at all like the materialist view.
Is the timing of cremation important?
No. Once the mind has left, feed it to the dogs. It doesn't matter. I mean, I say that's my view. It's not Buddha saying that. I'm saying that. Once the mind has left, it doesn't matter. But I mean, of course, you know, Tibetans, Lama Zopa quotes a lot in his book from a particular book that was written by some Tibetan in Dharamsala, especially for Tibetans, about how to do all the death process. And so they have astrology, and they say there are different times it's good to do this and do that. So yes, according to them, there's astrology, and it might be beneficial to do it on this day instead of that day, but we don't tend to do that too much. But yeah, for sure, Tibetans would use astrology to work out the best days to do things, for sure. They would do that. Go on.
What happens if you die alone?
What happens if you die alone is how qualified you are to die well or not. I mean, if you've never done any practice, you know, and you've never thought about impermanence, you've never thought about death, and you haven't practiced virtue, then you will die very unhappily, I'm sure. If you've got virtue and you've practiced, and if you're really together, you'll die well. But I think most of us aren't that qualified. And that's why I think it's so precious to sit with people and help them, just be a support, even if you don't say much, just to be there. Because we all know when you're fearful or sick, what you need most is a person just to be there to give you courage. So I think it'd be a very precious thing, you know. But in the yogis, one of the chapters is, what if you die if you're a yogi? Then the yogis want you to leave the room and close the door and mind your own business, because they're in charge. They know exactly what they're doing. They're completely in charge. Most of us, until we're highly realized, until we've got realization of emptiness or a lot of virtue, we need to be supported. It's very precious to do that, just to make people feel comfortable. And even your dog needs a support, you know, to be secure. Your doggy adores you, so just to be around your doggy, make them feel secure, is making their mind be peaceful, and that can help the virtuous karma to be triggered. It's so important, you know. What else, Jim?
This is our last question.
Head
Are
on.
there exercises you recommend, such as visualizing one's death, imagining one's own death, that will help prepare for when the time comes?
I think, yes, it's one of the practices, very much. I think we really could do that, you know, to try to, yeah, I think it's really, it's like, you know, I remember, you know, it's like you know, what do they call it? Like positive thinking or something. You visualize going through that thing. You see yourself, if you're an actor, you see yourself on the stage, you see yourself doing it. So it gives you more confidence. So it's a really good exercise to go through the process, and then certainly think of these 8 stages. You visualize each of the stages, lessening this. And so it can be very, very helpful to confront the fear, you know, absolutely it can be very helpful. Not to make you just miserable and depressed, but to help you just, or even just, I think the most powerful one is, here we all are, because we all grasp at ourselves as permanent, you know. I'm saying all these words. I've edited Lama Zopa's teaching. I know all these teachings, blah, 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 impermanence. But I can tell you with certainty, I do not believe for 1 second I'm going to die today. No way in the planet. I'm going to be here tomorrow. We all believe that. We grasp at permanence so strongly. So the most practical application of this idea is, as Lama Zopa says, it's best to think, I will die today, not out of panic, but out of a wake-up call. So then as soon as you think I could die today, you check yourself, you realize you don't want to carry, I mean, why would you, if you know you're going to die today, why would you hold on to that anger against your sister? You'd forgive her immediately because you don't want to die with anger. So it's a really practical approach to think of you dying today, going to the hospital. You don't get all morbid and do it in a stupid way. It's a wake-up call. If I could die today, and then you pick yourself up and you carry on, and you have enthusiasm for your life. You don't waste your life, you know. That's the better approach, I think. What else, Julie?
That's it. We are done with
done.
the questions.
Amazing. Well, 2 hours gone like a dream. I fit in a few things, but I mean, the version that Joy has got there is an older version that Wisdom published, which is all the structure is all the teachings are the same, Joy, but it's they really edited the book really badly with respect to Wisdom. So then they kindly agreed to do it properly, which is the way I did it, and that's come out now, called How to Face Death Without Fear. And it's only available digitally right now because Lama Zopa passed away last year. So we're doing we're doing an edit, adding new information into the book as a reprint, but the digital book is still available, How to Face Death Without Fear. Well, go on, go, Julie.
I just want to mention that I really encourage people to get that book, and also that TLC has a manual, a very, very concise manual that was authorized by Gyaltsen Rinpoche.
Wonderful.
Across the board, the whole dying process with information on secular things, and also a glossary in the back that explains all the words. So it's for people who are not Buddhists, so that families can understand what's going on.
Good, Julie. It's amazing. I think all of this now, I just want to say too, I think in the West as well, in the modern world, this is so much more open now. I remember in Australia, I went to a couple of conferences, and one conference was these doctors and nurses who elect now to work with the dying. It's so wonderful, you know. I remember a conference in a hospital, a children's hospital. And of course, the one death we can't bear to think about is children. And so this wonderful doctor, he tried all the fear and the problems and the suppression and everything and the guilt that comes around dying children. He was such a dear doctor, and it was all so open. And the morgue for the babies, the dead babies, was like a nursery. It was like designed like a nursery, you know, and the little brothers and sisters would run in and out. Come and meet my dead brother. So it's so good that it's all round now, the Buddhists as well as lay people, ordinary people, working with dying, helping dying people. It's for our own sake, but also for the dying one. In particular, the Buddhist one is for the dying people as well as for ourselves, you know. So this one, so you can get that manual. What's it called, Julie, the manual you're describing?
It's called Instructions for the Transitional State. And if people go to our website and they look at the top menu, when they drop down, they'll find it. It says manual.
I highly recommend. This is so good. This is so good. I'm so happy.
Thank you.
Everybody, we finished our little 2 hours here, gone like a dream. I hope there's something useful that triggers some things in our own selves to think about these issues, to be practical, go beyond fear. There's no benefit in having fear. And of course, the Buddhist perspective, know that we can learn to be in charge of this process, not just cross our fingers and hope for the best, you know. So we use our lives well for our own sake and the sake of others, so we can die well, so we can die well, so then we can know how to help others die well. So we just dedicate these 2 hours, anything that's useful, information that's useful, how marvelous, all these seeds we've sown in our mind, may they ripen in the long term in our own ability to be of benefit to others, long term our Buddhahood, for the sake of sentient beings. Jangchub, Semchog Rinpoche, Makye Panam Kegyuchig, Kepa Nyampa Mepa Yang Gong Ne Gonju Pava Shog, Gewa Di Nudodag, Lama Sangye Drubgyune, Droa Chikyang Malupa, Dei Sala Gerpa Shog. And I want to thank Julie and TLC because you're doing an amazing job. I'm so grateful you're doing this work. It's incredible. Encouraging other people. It's fantastic. So keep moving, everybody. Never give up, never give up, never give up.